Okay, I'd like to call the meeting of the Board of Directors on March 1st, 2022 to order. Need a roll call.
Director Bragman.
Here.
Director Gibson.
Here.
Director Kohler.
Here.
Vice President Schmidt.
Here.
And President Russell.
Here. Okay, I need a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Director Bragman.
Aye.
Director Gibson.
Aye.
Carrie, I'm sorry. Do I see a hand? There might be some public comment on the agenda. Do we want to check on that quickly?
Oh, sure.
Sorry about that.
Okay, Ed, I believe. Yes, Ed, go ahead. You wanted to comment on the agenda?
I had a comment for the opening comments. It's not on the agenda.
Okay,
So,
Not yet.
sorry
Ed.
about that.
Not yet. Not yet.
Thank you.
We'll come back to it.
All right, and then I also see Mimi Willard. Miss Willard, did you have a comment on the agenda, ma'am?
In effect, yes, it is on the agenda. My issue about the agenda is that agenda item 10 has been scheduled as for informational purposes only. And it is an urgent, timely matter that should be subject to a vote. I am urging you to do so now with by scheduling a special meeting so that agenda item could be dealt with in a timely way. And as you are aware, we have a serious drought that we are facing. This board has said recently that they are trying to have all options on the table. One of the options that needs to be on the table, and I have not prejudged what should happen with this option, but one of the options that needs to be on the table is desal. And in order for you to potentially consider desal in a timely fashion and without undue excess expense, it should be placed a ballot measure should go on the June ballot to reverse constraints on desal as a possible component of future MMWD water supply. So I hope that you will somehow figure out how to get into the agenda tonight a vote to actually schedule this special meeting later this week or very early next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. John Lashinsky. Sir, did you want to comment on the agenda? Mr. Lashinsky?
Let's just keep going.
Okay, yeah, let's just go ahead further. There are no more further comments.
Okay.
Whoa, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I wanted to comment on what that lady just said. And that is that I too have some comments about that item 10. And the only thing I want to make a point of, aren't we going to discuss that when we get to it?
Correct.
Okay, great. I would like to take 3 minutes and comment at that time, if that's okay.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. There are no further comments on the agenda. Okay.
All righty.
Am I doing roll call right? Okay, thank you. Director Bragman?
Aye.
Director Gibson?
Aye.
Director Kohler?
Aye.
Vice President Schmidt? And President Russell?
Aye. Okay, now public comment on items not on the agenda.
Okay, Ed. Go ahead, Ed.
Yes, thank you. I'd just like to cover a couple things here.
Go ahead, sir.
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, thanks. I'd like to comment on a couple of items here. A pipeline to East Bay Mud would be a $100 million financial fiasco that provides nowhere near what we need because of their unwillingness to degrade service to their own customers. Their declared policies would strict only to times of declared emergency. And they required that we subsidize programs like their low-income program for a service area that includes the city of Oakland. All of this for a pipeline we may almost never use. And recycling, according to the 2040 study, could likely only provide about 16% of our needs, but only if there's water to recycle and at a cost potentially much higher than desal. And raising Sulajula would only, sorry, did someone say something?
No.
Okay, and raising Sulajula would only add 5 to 6 months storage, and it would be drought sensitive. When MMWD's third recent plan is completed in June or July, there's going to be only one significant answer for us, desal. In his IJ opinion piece today, Dick Spotswood extensively quoted MMWD staff's recommendation to proceed with putting a repeal of Measure S on the June ballot. And as President Russell said after last Thursday's back and forth on the Prop S ballot issue, and I quote, "We have the voter interest right now with respect to desalinization," end quote. "We're living on borrowed time and obstacles to our only salvation need to be removed now. We need revocation of Prop S to be placed on the June ballot. And President Russell, I respectfully ask that you consider soliciting public comments before the board discusses this agenda item number 10. If the board is serious about soliciting public input, we should speak before you all decide what you're going to do, not after. Thank you very much for your attention. I do appreciate it.
Thank you. Paul Mann, please.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Great. So if you were on an outdoor hike in the middle of nowhere for an extended period of time with only a full canteen of water to drink, and you were told you may or may not find water on your path ahead, would you drink it as if you had enough water to last you, or would you find ways to make it last? The United Nations report was released yesterday based on years of research from hundreds of scientists, which found that the impacts from human-caused climate change were actually larger than previously thought. It specifically points to our extreme drought situation here in the West and says these impacts are actually accelerating much faster than we thought. Although we received a blessing with the Triple River storm last year, we've now gone through our driest winter months in history and have only a scant amount of rain forecasted on this first day of spring. So let's stop hoping for rain and immediately start planning for no rain, so we don't lose risking another drop of the precious water that still remains in our reservoirs. As a water conservation system specialist, I know that the surest way to achieve long-term sustainability is to enable homes and businesses to capture and reuse water that flows through their property every day. Gray water systems, home water recycling systems, and rainwater harvesting systems are proven to conserve 50% or more of potable water usage. Think about that. If we were able to reduce potable usage by 50%, we would double the lifetime of the water that's currently stored in our reservoirs. But to do this, we have to make the systems more affordable. So I'm here to request of the board that Marin Water start investing more heavily in enabling home and business infrastructures for water capture and reuse. How? Give more in rebate for laundry and landscape gray water systems than $100. Create rebates for home water recycling systems, such as Hydroloop and Aqualoop. Create a rebate to cover the water meter backflow prevention device and the annual inspection costs required by Marin Water for all rainwater harvesting systems, gray water systems, wells, and water recycling system installations. And rebate commercialized truck delivery of recycled water in order to feed dry landscapes during the warm months. As the UN suggests, we're out of time with climate change and the forthcoming impacts of drought. We need to take decisive action now with the intention that there will not be water available to refill our canteens on the trek ahead. We still have time while we still have water in our reservoirs. Let's do everything we can to make that water last. Otherwise, we may soon find ourselves where we were last summer, but this time without a Triple River canteen filling station to be found. Thank you.
Thank you. We have two more speakers, Baron Hamill and Phil Sauter. Ms. Hamill?
With the recently released new and even more dire warnings of the need to reduce emissions to prevent further global warming, it behooves us to look more carefully at the upstream effects of adding desalinization as a source of water for our community. We already know how the water management choices we make today will significantly affect greenhouse gas emissions in the future. Yet people still view desal as a relatively quick and easy fix because seawater is so accessible here. But few think beyond the water and pay little attention to the consequences of that which powers the machinery to make it possible. Those effects must not be overlooked in the scheme of things. Rather, I believe that our focus as a responsible partner in the world needs to be how to make water that would otherwise go down the drain usable again before it's irretrievably lost. The technology for recycling wastewater is already in place. It just needs to be expanded upon so that more of this commodity is part of our infrastructure and readily available to all. Wastewater is a misnomer. It's a valuable resource that needs to be tapped. Thank you again for your attention.
And Mr. Sauter, please.
Yeah, am I unmuted?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. I didn't see conservation on the agenda for tonight, so I'd like to make a few comments about that issue. And I sure hope that in future meetings, it will rise to the level of board consideration. My reason for starting to attend these board meetings in the last few months was basically that study that was done to reduce or delay the water releases for the salmon. And I was impressed by the study, although I was sad that what it was trying to do is figure out how little water the salmon could get by with. And that study went through riffle by riffle and red by red, figuring out how much water we could withhold from the salmon without causing further decline in the species. I really think it's important, and I'll be coming back with maybe with some more specific recommendations for the district to start at this time studying the potential for conservation. A few years ago, when we were working against that 10 million gallon tank on White Hill, I know the district was using numbers that were kind of mind-boggling today. I think they were looking at a storage or a usage need of 41 million gallons per day in the summer. And that really, I think that equates to like 225 gallons per capita. Just incredible numbers as we look at what the district was thinking even 10 years ago. I think there's a real opportunity, and I'm going to raise my hand to help in the analysis, to look at the conservation steps that the district has already taken and try to develop a long-term managed approach to conservation. I did some rough numbers, and it seems like if we got down to even 100 gallons per capita per day, we could extend our water supply from 2.5 years to 3.5 years. And if we were ever able to reach 90 gallons per day, we could extend our water supply to 4 years. Last meeting, I heard Director Russell talk about it, learning from other communities such as Santa Cruz. I think we can learn from our communities within our own water district, because as I recall, the district's nine gravity systems have different water usages. And I think we can learn from what some of our own what our own people are doing here within the community. So again, I really would like to see conservation upgraded as a serious source of water supply. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. There are no further speakers.
Thank you, Phil. Okay, directors and general managers announcements. You want to start, Ben? You're muted.
I don't have any announcements tonight, President Russell.
Okay. Larry?
No announcements tonight, thanks.
None for Cynthia. Jack?
Yeah, I have one. Yes, we Marine Water have been a member of the North Bay Water Reuse Association for a number of years. We had a meeting yesterday, and at yesterday's meeting, we had the election of officers for the year. Supervisor Rabbit from Sonoma was elected chair, and I was elected vice chair. So I think it presents some opportunity, hopefully presents some opportunity for us. So we'll see how it plays. So.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Jack.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Nothing.
Okay, I have nothing. Okay, I need a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Move approval.
Second.
Director Bregman?
Aye.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Kohler,
Aye.
Vice President Schmidt,
Aye.
and President Russell.
Aye. Okay, item 6 is a public hearing on the resolution adjusting director division boundaries following the 2020 Centennial census.
All right, my name is Jared Mills. I'm the staff attorney here at the Marin Municipal Water District, and I'll be presenting this item tonight. Also, we have Gavin McGee from the district's GIS team joining us. Terry, if you can pull up the presentation, have a brief presentation.
It's not wanting to pull up, but hold on. I'm trying to work my magic here. Here we go. Okay.
All right, thank you very much. So tonight is going to be the second public hearing regarding redistricting. And if you can go to the next slide. So first, just kind of an overview of where we've been and where we are tonight. So in this process, in September 23rd, 2021, at the Finance and Administration Committee, we had kind of an overview of the redistricting process that would be used at the district. This process is slightly different than that used by the city or counties, if members of the public tonight have seen those processes. On January 27th, we brought back the census data also to the Finance and Administration Committee that showed the total populations broken down by the divisions. And then the first public hearing was held on February 1st, 2022. There we provided the really detailed census data that included the voting age population and also the racial and ethnic data of each division. And we also unveiled the proposed adjustments and the draft map that we are proposing adoption of tonight. Tonight we'll hold the second public hearing, and if the board determines to do so, we will adopt the resolution containing the new map. Okay, next slide. So just a recap of the last public hearing, if members of the public were not in attendance, we presented the detailed census data there. The census data revealed that the 5 divisions for each director are substantially equal in population. That's a term of art. Under federal law, any deviations within 10% are determined to be substantially equal. And that means that you don't need adjustments based solely on population. At that meeting, staff proposed essentially some adjustments that I would refer to as cleanup items. And essentially those would realign the division boundaries with new census blocks and also the district's LAFCO boundaries that have changed slightly since the last division boundaries were adopted. Total, that is 21 minor adjustments, which are attached and also included in the packet tonight. I have 2 here with impact population shifts. It's actually 1 because the map that's labeled census boundary change number 1, we've already adjusted it to ensure that the area of Fairfax is all included in the division with the rest of Fairfax, which we can look at later if the board would like to do so. We also, at the last public hearing, we unveiled the proposed maps for the division boundaries. These are available on the district website, which I believe is on the next slide, if we go there. So anyone tuning in tonight, you can go to marinwater.org/redistricting. We have all the current adjustments that are being proposed in PDF format. We also have an interactive map that says proposed. You can click on that. You can enter your address. You can see if any of these adjustments are near you, and you can also zoom in and out to see local landmarks, street names, etc. A few other things that we've done since the first public hearing, in addition to making the maps and information available on the website, is the February newsletter alerted customers that we would be focusing on redistricting tonight. and how they can get more information about the process. We've also published the notice in the Marin IJ and then distributed the agenda packets with the maps that are being proposed. Okay, next slide. So tonight's objectives, we're going to review the proposed division map that was presented at the February 1st public hearing. At that point, I'll take any board questions, comments. Then I will ask President Russell to open up the second public hearing to receive public comments. At the close of public comment, if the board desires to do so, we will adopt the resolution containing the proposed division map. And next slide, please. So the proposed division map would result in the total populations within each division that are shown here. If you look at the 2020 census population, that's per division. You see the total population in the district is about 193,000 now, and that results in each district having about 38,600 people in it. To the right, that's what we calculate as the percentage of deviation, and that just shows if the district's population there is over or under that ideal population down at the bottom. Of importance here is that 2.02 that's highlighted in green. If that number is less than 10%, it is presumed to be lawful under federal court guidance. So basically the way you get that number is you subtract the highest division minus the lowest division, you get that difference and you divide it by the average population down below. So that is good. Terry, next slide, please. This is also just kind of for reference. One thing that we always want to make sure of if we're moving anyone from different divisions, that we're not impacting any minority or ethnic minority groups' voting rights or ability to influence an election. As I noted, only one change is going to result in any population changes that's being proposed tonight. And we've only identified 3 parcels being impacted by that. So it's very minor. Okay, Terry, next slide. So tonight, if the map is approved and adopted by the board, essentially the map will be submitted to the county elections department by no later than April 17th. And that is required by a new law that was adopted at the end of last year, SB 594. The new division boundaries then would first be used in the November 8th, 2022 general election for the election of directors who are up for re-election at that time. Okay, next slide, Terry. All right, so the next steps, if there are any board comments or questions, I'm happy to answer those then. After that, we'll go and open the public hearing, and then the board can decide if they would like to adopt the resolution. So.
Okay, any board comments?
Just Jared, I think District 3 gained those 3 parcels from LAFCO from Ross. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes. So that's LAFCO, I believe, changed 7 here. And it would be the 3 parcels there. What happened is the town of Ross annexed that area. Okay. That's shaded on the map. Okay. So those parcels would be moving from Division 2 to Division 3. Okay. And what that would do is during the elections, county election officials would know everyone in the town of Ross gets the ballots for Division 3. So it saves a lot of money. And it also allows people living in that area to know who the representative is more easily. Yeah.
It's everybody's in the community of interest, the same community of interest.
Exactly.
That's my community, not Ross. Not Ross. Okay, thanks a lot.
Okay, we're ready to open the public hearing. Let's do so. Comment from the public?
We have so far 1 public comment, Mr. Roger Roberts. Go ahead, Mr. Roberts.
Just a matter of curiosity. The census districts and the numbers in them Are those the same as the voting public listings for those same districts? Is that one and the same?
No.
Would you like me to respond to that, President Russell?
Sure.
So there are actually two different things that you look at whenever you're evaluating redistricting. One is the total population, and that's everyone who resides in the area. That could include people that are under voting age and also non-citizens. And then there's the voting age population, which is also a subgroup of the census data. That looks at only people who are registered voters, so 18 years and older, and also citizens. I think that addressed your question.
That do it, Roger?
Did I hear correctly that you're really talking about the voting age numbers in those districts? Yes?
No, so the numbers shown tonight that are there were two different charts shown tonight. So the numbers shown tonight with the population per district, that's the total population. So that's everyone.
And so that actually is what defines the districts, not the number of voters?
That's correct. So what we do is we look at the populations within each, the total population. So that's everyone of all ages. Citizenship status is irrelevant. And that's what we base it off of to ensure that the populations in each division are as equal as possible.
That's fine, but are there any discrepancies between the number of the people that are voting in those districts and the total number of people that live in the district? Is it basically within 1 or 2% of each other, or is there a significant difference?
So the voting turnouts, or are you speaking to registered voters?
No, the actual registered voters.
So for redistricting purposes, that's not something that we look at.
Are you required to look at that?
No, it is based off total population.
So it's just a pure census district exercise.
That's correct.
I believe at the last public hearing, we did share some information regarding the different ethnic groups in voting numbers to make sure that there wasn't a dilution of any particular voting group within a possible ethnic group. But we're not required to base the population distribution numbers on voting citizens only. It's a total population.
Yeah, well, fair enough. But Molly, you and I all of us recognize that in the canal area, probably as many as a third of the people there who live there don't vote because they're not citizens. And so, does that mean there's a skew in how these districts are created? I'm just asking the question. I don't know what the truth of the matter is.
It's a fair question. It's not the legal requirement that we are tasked with evaluating.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Roger.
There are no further comments.
With that, I'm going to close the public hearing and we will move on. Thank you all to item 7, resolution authorizing.
Larry, we need to vote.
Yeah, we need to adopt.
Sorry. Getting ahead of myself. Roll call.
Well, I'll make a motion to adopt the resolution. And I guess that incorporates the maps.
That's correct.
I'll second.
Got it. Thank you. Director Bragman?
Aye.
Director Gibson?
Aye.
Director Kohler?
Aye.
Vice President Schmidt?
Aye.
And President Russell?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. Now item 7, resolution authorizing award of contract 1927 East Blithedale Pipeline Replacement Project.
Hi, I'm Zach Talbot, Associate Engineer. This evening, I'm presenting the East Blithedale Pipeline Replacement Project. This project was presented at the December 17th Ops Committee with a recommendation to review and refer to a future board meeting for award. Bids were opened on February 24th, and the lowest responsible bidder was from Majora and Gelati in the amount of $2,237,237. District staff recommends the board approve a resolution authorizing award of this contract to Majora and Gelati.
Any questions? Any public comment?
There are none.
Can I get a motion, please?
Move approval.
Second.
Roll call.
Director Bragman,
Aye.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Kohler,
Aye.
Vice President Schmidt,
Aye.
and President Russell.
Aye. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Number 8, Proposition 1 funding for supporting water efficiency programs.
Okay, there she is. I'm looking for Carrie.
Good evening, board. Y'all are moving along so quickly. Carrie Pollard, Water Efficiency Manager. So I have this item. So this is an approval item. And what we have before you is some grant funding that has been awarded to the district as part of a 2019 joint grant application with the 11 Bay Area water utilities, or 11 of the Bay Area water utilities all joined together to submit on Prop 1 grant funding to fund our water efficiency projects. This agreement would be an MOU for all 11 organizations to distribute the funds that are being awarded, and the district would have access to just over $222,000 for reimbursement for smart home water monitors. So those would be our flume devices that were distributed during the drought, and also to perform a real water loss component analysis. So East Bay Mud is the local project sponsor, and the funding would run from the state to ABAG to East Bay Mud, and then East Bay Mud to all of us. And so what we're looking for tonight is authorization for the general manager to negotiate and sign this multi-party MOU with East Bay Mud. It's not finalized yet. You can imagine negotiating with all of these various utilities has taken some time, but we're fairly close. And so we wanted to bring that before you for your consideration. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
What is a real water, whatever it was?
Yeah, the real loss component analysis. So it takes a deeper dive looking at our water loss, and it looks to identify strategies to reduce our real losses, which are really looking closely at leaks, whether they're background, reported, and unreported leaks.
Okay.
Any questions? Yeah, can any of this water be used for automatic readers? Yeah.
Yeah, so they're for smart home water monitors. So they would be like our flume devices would qualify for this funding. So we'd be able to get reimbursement for that investment, or part of that investment that was made during the drought.
Okay.
So Carrie, are we gonna get reimbursed for the devices that we've already subsidized, or are we gonna have a new set of devices?
We can get reimbursement for the items that have already been distributed based on the date of when the grant was awarded, which is April of 2020.
Okay, so this is it's going to kind of backfill some of the subsidies that we've already paid. Okay, sounds like a good idea.
Yeah,
great job.
It's a great thing. I'm really excited about it. I think it's worth. I just want to really give a lot of credit to Carrie and her team for this, but also it's a great example of regional cooperation with our fellow water agencies. And I'm sure there are a few bugs to work out, or kinks to work out, but I don't have any doubt that you'll get there. And I think there's more money like this coming in light of the federal and I think some related state funds. I mean, don't have to talk about those right now, but I think this is just kind of the beginning in light of what we're seeing on the federal side for these kinds of projects.
Yeah, so I think you're right.
The motion to approve.
Second.
Public comment?
Yes, Clayton Smith, please.
Yeah, I'd like to ask, your name is Well, all I see is Marin water. The gal who just did the presentation.
Carrie Pollard.
Carrie. Hi, Carrie. How much of the percentage of water that you actually collect and distribute gets lost in your system? Do you have a percentage?
So in our urban water management plan, we do look at a percentage. It does publish a percentage looking back, right? But the state is kind of transitioning to a new way of evaluating water loss, which is our current status of looking at water loss, and that determines how good is the data going into the analysis, and then it gives us a score. So if you're looking at historic, you could find that in our urban water management plan. And to be honest, off the top of my head, I don't recall what that number is. Maybe Paul or Crystal know it and can reference it.
Yeah, we're at about 10 or 11% is the estimated water loss.
Yeah.
And I think that's about the industry standard, wouldn't you say, Crystal? Or maybe
yes, that's correct. Yeah, that's the industry standard.
And can you and for clarity, because it is important to mention, that's not how much water is lost. That's unaccounted for water. And a fair amount of that is due to discrepancies with meters. So this study hopefully will zero in on the actual loss, which will be less than that 10% number. We don't know how much less.
Okay. It also includes usage by the fire department and things like that. The things that aren't metered out go into this unaccounted for water.
That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you. There are no further comments.
All righty. We need a motion. We got the motion, right? I think,
got the
yes,
motion.
Motion and a second. So we just need the roll call.
Yes. Director Bragman.
Aye.
Director Gibson.
Aye.
Director Kohler.
Aye.
Vice President Schmidt.
Aye.
And President Russell.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, item 9. It's a water supply update.
Good evening, Board. Paul Sellier, Water Resources Director. And for a time, I'll be acting Operations Director as well. So send me all your questions and if we can get them answered. At tonight's water supply update, I'm sure we'll be familiar in the format. We do have one slight change. I've dropped in sort of a look at our operational plan for the water year that we're currently in. But we'll take a look at our current water supply and that plan for the water year, how we're going to fill the demands that we foresee, and then look at our projected water storage, and then of course precipitation outlook, and then we'll wrap up with a quick summary. So jumping in, our cumulative precipitation continues from our remarkable October and December. We are still above average, though you can see we're closing in on average as time goes by and we receive no more rain. But really looking at our condition here with cumulative precipitation, it's pretty good at this time. Reservoir storage, similarly, we're about 94% of total capacity. We're above average by quite a bit. And it'll be mid-March towards closing maybe the end of March where we start closing in on that average. So pretty good storage conditions at this point in time. Our operations plan, we're expecting a nominal demand of about 40,000 acre feet. And that's made up of about 26,000 acre feet of potable demands with, somewhere in the region of 14,500 acre feet of environmental and evaporative losses. So that's the picture on the demand side. And on the right, the supply side, of course, will match. The good news is we have the water and we're able to do that. And what you'll see is that from our reservoirs, we're looking at using about 11,400 acre feet. And Sonoma water will be trying to hit 9,900 acre feet. You know, you may recall we've said that we can get up to 12,500 with Castagna from Sonoma, but we've only just started using Castagna. So we're not going to have a full water year with Castagna, so hence the lower amount. Water recycling will be somewhere around 700 acre feet. And I'm just noting conservation at the level that the state's asking us for, and that's just equivalent to 3,800 acre feet. And reservoirs will, of course, contribute for the environmental releases and the evaporative losses, a total of 14,500. So that's how, that's what the demand side looks like. And this is how in operations we're planning to meet that demand. And again, this is for the current water year that ends September 30th, 2022. So speaking of Castagna, in response to some questions that we had last week, the pump station is construction of phase one is complete. And we're basically in a testing phase right now where we're conducting tests to make sure that the model results that we sort of did on our spreadsheets match up with the pressures and flows that we need to expect. And so we're working with our partners in North Marin to run through those tests. Operationally, our procedures are the same as they have been since 2020. Our tactics are to front load or to take as much supplemental water as is available until we know what sort of winter we're in. So this would allow us to take water across the summer when it's available, and come December, if it's wet, we can decide to slow down should the board agree with staff's recommendations at that time. We are working on a multi-party MOU that describes the operation of the pump station. We expect to have that done shortly. Looking ahead then at our projected storage as we go out in time, for folks that may not be familiar with this chart, the black line represents the reservoir storage levels that have already occurred. And the end of the black line is sort of where we are today at about 75,000 acre feet. The dashed lines extending from there are projections of storage levels out into the future. Up to the end of the chart is in December of 2022. The gray dashed line with the star on it, that's zero rain. So if we receive no rain at all, that would be our projected storage level. The orange dashed line is 25% of average rainfall. The blue line is 50% of average rainfall. And the green dashed line is the average rainfall. So if we received average rainfall from here on out, the green line would be what we would follow. Looking then at the blue line, this is the average end of water year storage. About 55,000 acre feet is our average storage level in the reservoirs at the end of the water year, so September 30th. And I've marked September 30th on the chart with these stars. And you can see back in 2020, it's September 30th of 2020, we were about 52,000 acre feet. September 20th of 2021, we were at 27,000 acre feet. We're projecting this year, September of 2022, to be, in the worst case with no rain, we'll be at about 56,000 acre feet. And if we received average rain, we might be as high as 68,000 acre feet at the end of the water year. The gray triangles represent the triggers that are in the district code. And the significance of those triggers, I'm sure we all kind of understand that when we hit an April 1st trigger of 40,000 acre feet, the district code indicates that we would, do rationing of water supply, right? So we would have some kind of a board action, and we would take action to, ask our customers and require our customers to reduce their use. Also in the code is the sort of sundown of that action. And in the code, chapter 13.04, it indicates that if we're not in the vicinity of this 40,000 acre feet on April 1st, then in fact, the action prescribed in the code is that we cancel the restrictions that have been placed. So as you can see, we're not going to be anywhere near the trigger level on April 1st. In fact, our storage level April 1st, even with no rain, will be somewhere in the region of 70,000 acre feet of water in the reservoirs. So I just wanted to draw your attention to the significance of those triggers and that they are embedded in our code. Precipitation outlook. Of course, our water supply is good. Precipitation outlook, notwithstanding, fantastic. We're going to get some rain this week. Looks like maybe 1/3 of an inch on Thursday or so. But in general, the outlook is dry. The ridge is not quite at its ridiculously resilient level yet, but you know it's pretty significant, and it's deflecting the storms to the north. So we do anticipate that maybe we've had the majority of our rainfall this year, and that's a sentiment shared by Daniel Swain and the Weather West blog that he writes. NOAA, of course, are sort of indicating here that we're in the short-term outlook that we're going to be below normal in terms of precipitation, and that they're kind of hedging their bets going forward, saying, yeah, there could be some rain in March and April, but their models are not able to really predict with any level of accuracy beyond saying, yeah, it looks like equal chances that it could be dry or wet, wetter than normal. So summary then, precipitation for us is above average, though it's converging towards the average, and similarly storage levels are above average. And of course, absent rain, they're going to decline to average, probably sometime mid to late March, I would expect. As I mentioned, the near-term precipitation, we're planning for the rest of spring to be pretty dry. Storage projections, on the other hand, do indicate that even without rain, we will be at about average storage levels come the end of the water year. Recognizing, right, that the state is still in a drought, and the effects of the October and December rainfall were different for us than it was for the rest of the state. That said, we continue to message to our customers and support the state's requests for 15% conservation, and just in general for us to use water wisely. And that's the end of the presentation this evening. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Paul. Any questions?
Nope. Paul, I just,
go ahead,
when I looked at your report, I didn't really, I wasn't able to really follow on the demand and supply exactly how you work that. And then I looked at our finance report from February, which indicates that as far as acre feet of water consumed by the district, by our customers, by the residents, there's still a very, very good amount of conservation going on in Marin County. So looks here like January was 40% reduction. February was 36% reduction. So from the previous year, from actual to actual. So that's a significant savings above and beyond the 15% that you baked into your calculations. So maybe we could be a little more optimistic about stretching our supply. I don't know. What do you think?
We can, of course, sharpen the numbers. I do tend to err on the conservative side when planning the worst case scenario. But absolutely, I can, we can sharpen the numbers.
Yeah, no, I'm not criticizing that. I'm just saying our residents should be aware that they're doing a pretty good job, and that conservation has really significantly reduced water consumption in our district. And, I don't think that's really sort of publicized enough, even among regionally. Marin has done very, very well. I mean, you guys have really kind of turned a corner you know, this year. And I think, you know, it deserves to be called out and, you know, kind of praised because that's going to stretch supply. And, you know, I just hope our residents can keep it up.
You know, I really agree with that. I appreciate your making that point, Larry. And I think the thing to emphasize there as well is that these are permanent changes, right? It's one thing to ask people not to wash their car or water less, but I think the reason we're seeing, and Paul, you can let me know what your take of these numbers is, but my sense of it, given the success of Carrie's program, is that these are the long-term investments we've made in, you know, in turf changeouts, in gray water, you know, and the other rebates are having this impact. I mean, there's always going to be some spring back after you know, a significant period of reduced use, but it does appear that some of this is going to be permanent in light of the programs that have been in place and the efforts of Carrie and her team.
I think, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you know, it's just something that we need to watch closely to see how permanent those changes are versus, you know, sort of the urgency changes that folks made in their lifestyle. But it could be pretty interesting if depending on the trends we see in consumption. But the most recent ones, I was pretty amazed really at the percentages. We're still closing in on 40%, which is a pretty good accomplishment for a district of our size.
Paul, did you have a thought about that?
No, I think Director Bragman really hit it. You know, the degree of permanency we've got to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
And really monitor it. So I think your point about, you know, maybe bringing this back with every water supply update, just to kind of let us know where we are in that kind of level of detail. We can look at some production numbers, you know, for between billing cycles, those kinds of things. And Chuck has access to some of those, some of the, you know, the automated read meters, the AMI data can be quite helpful. And I think Carrie has access to some of the flume data. So I think we can get a pretty good picture of what's going on.
Yeah. And I think we were also talking with Carrie about performance metrics for that program. So we should circle back to that at some point.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay. Larry, do you want to go to public comment?
Well, yeah. Yeah, what happened is I lost internet. I have a couple of questions. Do we have any idea, Paul, about how many account closures we were or accounts running at zero from business closures or people moving out?
Oh, I don't have that information to hand this evening.
Right. Let's see if we can put our hands around that. And I also thought that Phil Sauter's comment about comparing the tanks, basically, the tank feed systems to each other for per capita usage was kind of interesting. He said there were 9 districts, 9 sub-districts. It's kind of an interesting idea if you could explore that a little bit, not tonight, but in the future. You know, maybe make a table and just say what they are to the extent we can estimate the number of people that are in those sub-districts.
We can look at those zones, yeah.
Okay. Public comment?
Yes, there are 4, Clayton Smith and Chance Cutrano. Mr. Smith. Go ahead, Mr. Smith.
Can you see me?
Yes,
no, we cannot.
Okay. Wait, but I thought you said you could. Paul, there's a book I would like to recommend to you. It's called The West Without Water. It's written by a professor of paleoclimatology over at the University of California, Berkeley. Her name is B. Lynn Ingram. And she has also, if you go on to YouTube with her name, she did many years ago a consortium on water that is very informative. and she's probably the most educated person on water long-term that probably is around concerning the Western United States, and particularly California and the Bay Area. And the reason why I bring it up is I think it would be very good information for all people on the board to be educated in her pronouncements and studies as you look at readjusting the county to water consumption going forward in the future. I also hope that you get somewhat involved with this housing project mandate situation that's coming down the pike. The idea of adding 14,000 new customers over an 8-year period of time to the demand schedule and what that's going to do. Because I think in light of that, you've got to begin thinking about increasing your reservoirs. Otherwise, I don't know how you're going to be able to meet that demand that's being planned by the housing authorities in Sacramento. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Catrano?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, directors and staff. Couple questions. First, I just wanted to thank Director Bragman, Director Kohler on just highlighting the fact that we still have what seems to be some durable conservation efforts, and hopefully that does keep up. I was wondering, first question, 4,500 acre feet lost to evaporation. I fully suspect that that's already been analyzed in terms of how to reduce that, or if there are ways to efficiently reduce the evaporation bit. I assume it's from the reservoirs, but I was wondering if there was any answer to that, or if that's just an accepted loss. And then the second thing, which Paul, I thought was a great end, is just acknowledging that the state is still in a drought and that we do need to continue to use water wisely. From what it sounded like, there are code restrictions that prevent the water district from conserving certain amounts unless they hit trigger levels. Otherwise, there's like a base level, 15%. I was wondering if the directors or staff are considering increasing that conservation level in the codes, or as far as restrictions, and just moving forward, given the variability or uncertainty of precipitation due to the climate crisis. But also, I was wondering if that 15% is tied to a base level from a particular year, or whenever those are reintroduced or ratcheted up, if that's just based on the current usage, or at what point that plateaus. So those are just a couple questions, but thank you very much for that data, super helpful.
Can I just ask, can we have staff respond to some of those questions before we move on? Because I think they're important.
Yeah, happy to try to answer the questions. So in terms of evaporation, it's just a planning number that we use. It's reasonably conservative. The sorts of things that we can do operationally are to, try to use certain reservoirs with a large surface area first. So you'll typically see us using Nicasio Reservoir, which is fairly large surface area to volume reservoir. And we'll use that preferentially across the summer warm months. Obviously, Kent Reservoir is conversely, it's quite a large storage, but it's pretty deep, and generally the borders of the lake are not as broad as Nicasio, and of course it's kind of in the fog zone a little bit, so there's reduced evaporation there. But we are limited to the extent of things that we can do on the reservoirs to reduce evaporation. The other comment I think was about the state's 15% voluntary. And I would just say that at the moment, the board of directors, we're still in the drought emergency, and we still have certain restrictions on the books that are beyond what our normal year restrictions are. And if we were to at some point return to our normal year restrictions, I think we we would probably easily achieve the voluntary 15% that the state's asking for. So I think we've yet to determine what our goal would be, and the board has yet to agree on removing those restrictions.
President Russell, could I make a brief comment on the evaporation issue? Something that I've been looking into at the suggestion actually of staff and not a manager, it's just one of the staff members I've been talking to casually, is floating solar panels on Bontempi. So they do that up in Healdsburg on a couple of their evaporation ponds. So that might, I mean, I think it would reduce evaporation. I mean, I don't know whether it's practical, whether it would be sort of aesthetically too jarring for people, but it's an interesting concept, and it is being done up in Healdsburg, although in a different context. But it's something I've wanted to bring up to the board because I think it's really intriguing, especially in light of the project that we're considering with Phoenix, because you could kind of close the loop using that electricity to pump the water from Phoenix to Bontempi. And there's just a number of ways that it could tie into our whole energy efficiency, carbon reduction goals. So it's just something I think is pretty intriguing and worth taking a look at when we have a little time. I don't know when that'll be, but maybe someday.
We had a proposal about 4 years ago or 5 years ago from a company that made floating solar units. It's an interesting idea, and yes, it does indeed reduce evaporation. It also improves efficiency of the solar units because they're much cooler than rooftop mounted units. So their efficiency goes up like 10 or 15% in generating capacity because of that cooling.
Wow.
So maybe we can dig that out and see who those folks were. The guy, I recall, he talked to me, I can remember, he was pretty aggressive about trying to get us to try it. I made the pitch, but didn't get too far with the rest of the board. So it's a good idea, and that's something to look at. And it is a bit aesthetically shocking. It's also a little hard on the birds who tend to want to land. The turtles like it, but the birds don't very much. So kind of a mixed bag there.
Yeah, mixed bag.
Any other questions?
We have two more public.
Yeah, I'm getting to it. Any public comment?
Yes, Paul Mann, then Diana Hedrick. Mr. Mann.
Hi, Paul, are you able to put up the projected reservoir storage page? Back on the screen?
Probably.
I may be able to do that.
Okay, thank you. So, you know, when I look at this, it just looks too hauntingly familiar as we look at let's say January of 2020 through September of 2021. I'm not a betting man, I'm not a stock man, but this certainly looks like a stock chart that's going the same direction. And when I'm hearing you talk about conservation, if we reduce, if the water goes down, or even if it doesn't, if the water levels go down, we still need conservation. I think that is absolutely the right direction. So kudos. My concern is if the conservation is basically saying, let's have customers cut back on their irrigation, well, that leads to drier landscapes. That leads to fire, greater chances of fire, which we are all concerned about, in addition to lack of water. I'm very happy that you received the pass-through grant for rebate money. And I really think I'd like to ask the board and the staff to think about, again, instead, when we think about conservation, let's put more money to home and business water capture and reuse systems, because that will turn this around. without compromising landscapes, plants, animals, the ecology that's so important here in Marin. That's how we can do it. So thank you.
Of course, it does take rainfall.
Well, gray water systems produce water every day. It's water that comes from showers and tubs, from basins and laundry, and that can reduce. My systems. I'm on 0% potable water for my landscape because of that.
Anyone else?
Yes, Diana Hedrick, please.
Hi, thank you very much for taking my call. So I'm kind of calling in regards to my concern for, the development of housing all across Marin County. I guess it was a few months ago, someone called Marin Water Department on me because we were watering our lawn during the drought. And technically we had set up our sprinklers are on like a Wi-Fi network, and our Wi-Fi network got reset. And when it got reset, our sprinklers time got reset. So if I had it on at 10 o'clock at night, it, went on at 10 o'clock in the morning. So, Marin Water comes to our house and says they would give us a citation if they see our water on during the day. So I'm not allowed to water my lawn during the day, fine. But I don't understand how Marin County and where our water resources are going to be if we're able to have, hundreds of more people move down the street from where we live. How are we going to accommodate that? And so I really want you guys to kind of be able to push back on the state or whomever is requesting these increases in housing, because it just doesn't seem like we legitimately have the resources, clean water to be able to just maintain the people who live here currently. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
There are no further comments.
Okay, let's move on to item 10.
Item 10, President Russell and board members, is for the board to consider a ballot measure for the June 7th election to repeal Ordinance 418 that, as it stands, requires voter approval for financing or construction of a desalination facility. And this item was a continuation from a discussion last week at Finance, so I won't go into it other than, noting that we've identified in the staff report 2 alternatives for the board to consider. One would be to schedule a special meeting in advance of March 11th. And if you're interested, we'll talk about the details of that. To, in the special meeting, consider there'd be an item to consider directing staff to move forward with the ballot measure. The other alternative is to defer putting a ballot measure on the June ballot and instead allow the activities that we have in front of us, including the water supply assessment, to proceed forward and consider a ballot measure at a future point in time, depending on how that study and other work plays out over time. So with that, I'll answer any questions the board may have.
Okay.
I'm going to bring a question, which is we also have an election in November. And I counted the days, 88 days back from November, and that works out to about August 11th is more or less. So I'm just putting on the table that, we might have 2 bites at the apple here if there's any, if the board wants to move forward with the staff proposal. So just something to kind of mull over. I'm sure we're going to get a lot of public comments about this item. So maybe we should go there first, but it's just, that's the way the calendar works. So we can either, if the board wants to move forward, it's going to be a quick process to get it on the June ballot. You're going to literally have like an 88-day run before the election, and that might work for some people, or you know, putting it over until August, which we would get that resiliency study hopefully in hand by then. Whether that really would make a difference one way or the other, I'm not sure. I have pretty mixed feelings about the thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, don't we have an infinite number of bites of the apple? I mean, we could have a special election anytime, you know, I mean, it's...
That's true too.
Yeah.
That's true too. Mm-hmm. That's taking a much broader look at it than I am.
I'm sure more expensive too. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Any other thoughts?
Well, I
Public
think
comment.
Okay, more from staff. You know, part of the reason we brought this forward is we didn't have the full board at the last meeting, and it's at least it's my understanding that this is a staff generated proposal, and there's a sense that you know, I think Larry Bragman just raised that, you know, the assessment hasn't been done or hasn't been completed. We're in the middle of it, so there's a question about doing this before that. There's also, my sense is some, you know, some urgency to get this on the ballot now. But I think it's helpful for the public to hear why the staff feels that this is the time before the assessment has been completed.
Well, this is a policy decision for the board. If you're asking for my opinion, I mean, this is brought as an agenda item because of the timing issue in regards to the June ballot measure and the need for us to, you know, decide if we want to proceed with the June ballot measure. The staff report does indicate, and we talked about at finance, you know, two benefits, I suppose, of proceeding now. And one is having clarity that we don't have the constraint that we have now with Ordinance 418 in terms of assessing and likely further work developing all of these alternatives. The water supply assessment will not be necessarily complete. It will point to a roadmap that likely will have further work and further development. So anyway, assuming desal, and that's an assumption that may or may not prevail if it rises near the top and we want to do more studies, we could certainly do them with this ballot measure in place. It just, on one hand, would be good to know if this constraint is going to be here forever and we shouldn't consider desal, or would it be removed, say, in June? The other reason discussed in the staff report is emergency desal. And, you know, the strange weather we've had the last few years, I think suggests having more options in the event of a similar emergency that we were in this past year is prudent. And with this ordinance in place, it does limit our ability in certain ways to move forward if we wanted to with an emergency desal system. So in the event of a similar emergency, it really just leaves one option, and that's probably less ideal than having two. And the one option that would be, of course, is the intertie, the direction we were going.
Yeah. A question, Paul, about what you just said there. At our last meeting, I specifically asked you if we do not have the measure on the ballot, does the analysis of desal get any less examination? I mean, my attitude is we want no options off the table. Desal is a viable option. Intertie is a viable option. A new arrangement with Sonoma is a viable option. And I would do whatever need to be done to make sure those are all open options. And now I'm also, on the flip side, a little concerned that if we put the ballot measure on, we will find ourselves spending 90% of our time talking about the ballot measure and 10% of our time talking about the projects. That it almost could easily become a distraction. In any event, how do we get to the point of no options on the table? You know, it's just, you know.
Well, I would like to repeat my response from last week when you asked for assurance that regardless, the ballot measure, not the ballot measure, we will be assessing desal with the same rigor, the same robustness, and the same objectivity that we're going to be assessing all of the supply options without reservation, absolutely.
Okay.
So I agree with Jack. I think that's really important. I mean, I can't speak for everybody. This is, you know, our first meeting where we've all been together. But I agree. I think all options, including desal, should be on the table. And it's great to have that underscored that, you know, that addressing this measure doesn't affect that one way or another. You know, I'm going to throw out here just something for my fellow board members to consider. You know, if the immediate issue is the potential need for emergency desal, you know, if it continues dry into the next year, one thing, and I'm not necessarily saying we should do this, but just as an alternative for the June ballot, since I'm hearing some urgency on the part of staff, we could simply comply with the ordinance and seek a approval from the public for temporary desal, so that for some period of time. That way, you know, if we are in a position, because that really seems to be the most compelling argument, right? That if it's very dry, you know, I think the staff has made a case that we don't want to just have one. I don't think there would be just one option, but, you know, to preserve the option for emergency desal, doing, you know, sort of seeking that approval from the public might be one way to go. Just to have that done. Again, I'm really not advocating for that. I just want to put it out there as another possibility, since that, more than really anything else, since we've heard that we can go forward and do all these studies, and, you know, we're going to have that objective, rigorous, robust review of desal along with all these other options, as Jack mentioned. So I'm really just putting out another idea, maybe a third option to go along with Ben's two options.
You know, the problem is if you'd have to run a special election, which is very costly. So I think,
couldn't you just, would you have to? Yeah, I don't want, I mean, that I agree, but would it be any different than doing the repeal?
I think from my reading of it, we cannot finance or construct a facility under that statute, under 418.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think at some point, you know, it is a constitutional mandate ballot measure. So
I may not be being clear.
It has to get equal dignity by a vote of the people. So,
no, maybe I wasn't clear. I mean, Molly, if we were talking about running a ballot measure to repeal 418, and I'm suggesting, what about simply calling for the vote? Why would that be any different than the repeal? Maybe I'm not understanding the legal technicalities of the ballot.
Well, Director Kohler, I think I hear what you're saying is actually put an initiative, a ballot measure on asking for voter approval of financing and or construction of a desalination.
Well, facility. Of the emergency, because that's the immediate thing, right? That's the urgency in the near term.
Well, I mean, I think it depends on how you define near term. So I'd probably defer to Ben and Paul on that. Okay. I do think we'd want to look at that language there very closely as far as what we would be asking the voters to authorize for the district. I'm not saying it's not a possibility, it certainly is. Under the time constraints we have, I think really delving into, you know, making sure that we have the correct and proper language, that there's clarity there, that what we're asking, I think it's doable. It will be more difficult, however. We don't have a specific emergency desalination project in front of us. So then we'd be crafting permission for something that we really don't necessarily have parameters for. It's possible,
yeah,
but I think
it's hearing from staff is the most urgent need. So again, I'm not really proposing it. I just concern about moving ahead with approving something before we know we're going to do it, and it will be expensive either, So again, it's not really I'm not making a very strong proposal. I just want to make sure we're considering options, because it does seem to be. So I think I'm a little confused, because Ben did say, I think, that the other reason that that staff is proposing this is to address the emergency situation. So
that's true, and I'm saying we could do that. I just think that it's a more nuanced approach than a simple repeal, and that we might want to have further, lengthier discussion about exactly what the parameters of that look like, so that we could be very clear with the voters of what authorization we're asking for. Definitely not saying we can't do it. I'm just saying it's a bit more complex than what we're looking at doing in a very short time frame.
Okay, I actually thought it was simpler, but you're the expert.
Well, we kind of ran into this during our deliberations during the drought, where we kind of ran into a wall with what we can do, what we can't do. And,
right.
I mean, I'm not a desal proponent. I'm not a desal opponent. I was 12 years ago, but, if you look at how climate has changed, we had an IPCC report, 2 days ago, which is pretty chilling. So, I think all options have to be on the table. I mean, I don't want to prejudge it. I've looked at the desal plant in Santa Barbara, 3,300 acre feet a year, $8.5 million a year in operating and finance costs. It's not cheap, nor is it a perpetual water machine. Even when it's shut down, it's $1.5 million a year to run it. So I think, getting the information on the table about desal, its strengths and its weaknesses, is important, just so people can understand our process here. So like I said, I have very mixed feelings. I mean, do we put it on the ballot and just get that issue sort of off the table, that everything is going to be considered, without looking like, we're pre-selecting this way to go, this one project, when in fact we're not? And I think we all know we have several other promising options that we've been looking into. So, it's a complicated scenario that we're looking at. And in some ways it's like, hey, I'd like just to get it off the table and be done with, but we're going to hear public comment tonight that is very alarmed at that kind of rapid consideration of such a proposal. And I think that is something, that in the short term is going to be, a tough one to explain to the public. But, we could do either one,
Does the existing ordinance that we're wrestling with here interfere with us, for example, being in partnership with our other agencies to the north, Sonoma, or if we did the intertie with agencies out in the East Bay that themselves were doing desal, and we were obviously, because of the infrastructure we build, wrapped up in that? Does the current ordinance give us any restrictions there?
The current ordinance 418 that we're talking about specifically expressly states that the district shall not approve construction or financing for construction of a desalination facility unless such construction is approved by a majority of the voters. So there's a bit of interpretation there, but I think we have to give deference to the voters in this case, where you have an initiative that was voted on. And so I think if we're in partnership and we're contributing financial financially to construction of a desalination facility. I think there's an argument there that that would be, that could fall under the 418 ordinance.
Yeah.
Helpful. I just want to weigh in here that I have a number of concerns about moving forward with the ballot measure at this point in time. The first is that pursuing that ballot measure now, I think, will impact the perceived objectivity of our water resiliency assessment. I just think that even though we are all expressly committed to making sure that that assessment is objective, that it considers all of the options equally and in a very well-informed way so that we can use that assessment to make informed decisions. I don't think that public perception is going to, it would see this move in some ways as a predetermined outcome. And it could taint the results. If we came out with a result where we said, well, we're going to do, the desal actually looks favorable, people might say, well, that was of course where you were going all along. Again, this is perception. And I really am hoping that the assessment is actually an opportunity to really educate our customers about our options, and so that folks can really learn and feel that it was fairly and objectively looked at. I think also pushing the ballot measure now before completing the assessment deprives all of us of important information that might help us make an informed decision and maybe even be making an argument for why desal makes sense and why we ought to, why the measure would make sense. So I think in some ways moving forward without something that will be a valuable piece of information that could help inform the public about the real trade-offs, when we don't have that information now, I think we're asking our customers to make a decision when we don't have all of the valuable information that could be used to make an educated decision, which we would expect them to do. Waiting, I think the idea that Larry, Brandon, that you brought up in terms of waiting until November, where we could have yet another bite at the apple to run a ballot measure, it's a 5-month delay. Are we, that buys us the time to complete an assessment and have at least some of the information, again, that can help inform all of us about the merits of considering desal and whether it really warrants trying to remove that restriction so that we could move forward. It strikes me that 5-month delay is not significant enough it strikes me as we probably have that much time. The difference, given that constructing a desal facility, like the design and the construction, everything I would imagine would in and of itself take years. So is that a significant difference? And I think also if the assessment shows that desal is a low priority and we have spent the near $300,000 that we estimate to run the ballot measure, that's money that we might look at and say, well, that was money that we wish we hadn't spent. So those are my concerns that I've got with this. I'm very open to hearing what our callers, the folks who joined tonight, have to say, but those are my concerns at this point.
I would suggest we open it to public comment and find out.
Yeah.
I have right now 8 public commenters. The first 2, Susan Ives, then John Lashinsky. Susan?
Thank you. Thank you, MMWD board members and staff. I sent a letter to the board on this matter, but I also want to deliver my comments in person. Memories seem to be short, so let me refresh. In 2009, hundreds of Marin residents participated in emotional public meetings where they angrily objected to the MMWD's intention to push through a desal plant. There was an outpouring of environmental, climate, and cost concerns. The desal plant was viewed as a boondoggle. The costs would be borne by all ratepayers, with the benefits largely accruing to those with big lawns and golf carts. People have not shown up to protest because the public isn't aware of the move to revisit and potentially overturn Ordinance 418. People, including me, thought this matter was settled when Measure S received 55% of the vote. People aren't aware that this is even a thing. MMWD should ensure that their customers are informed that these plans are simmering. Since those painful public meetings in 2009, Marin residents have demonstrated our commitment to water conservation. MMWD has provided leadership. Conservation measures are working. These efforts should be strengthened, not relaxed or abandoned to a costly fossil-fueled desal facility known to add to our climate problems. I'm really shocked that the MMWD board is considering an action to rescind Ordinance 418 after voters strongly rebuked MMWD's ill-conceived plan to construct a costly and environmental damaging desal plant. Just yesterday, the United Nations issued a second dire report in the last 6 months on climate change. The chair of the IPCC, which issued the report, said, "It shows that climate change is a grave and mounting threat to our well-being and a healthy planet. Half measures are no longer an option." In August 2021, the UN Secretary General called the first IPCC report a code red for humanity. He called yesterday's report a damning indictment of failed climate leadership. The MMWD board has authorized a study into a variety of potential water supplies. That study has yet to be completed. Has the board predetermined the outcome of that study? Under pressure from a vocal minority, MMWD's board appears willing to circumvent the will of the voting public. Will failed climate leadership be your legacy? The question of Marin's desal plant was settled in 2010 through a democratic process. Voters, not the MMWD, prevailed. A simple repeal is an oxymoron. The voters' decision should be respected, not undermined by a handful of staff at MMWD.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Ives. I have to cut you off. I'm sorry, it's time over.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Leshensky?
Yeah, I got a question. Larry, why was this put on the board last week or so? This measure repudiating the one back in 2010. What was the reason again? Hello?
You're asking me?
Larry.
Which
Bragman.
Larry?
Sorry, yeah. Or Ben, I don't know. Whoever can answer that question. Why was this put on as a consideration? I thought that was a settled issue, that we had a proposition. And for God's sakes, you talk about, what's the word? You talk about putting in an analysis of this thing. You've had 10 years or more to do an analysis. It hasn't happened. You make it sound like this measure was just passed, a year ago. So my point only is that I'm a big supporter of desal. I think climate change is accelerating dramatically. I think that there's no earthly reason why we shouldn't seriously consider a desal plant, because that makes water. Every other option that you're looking at, conservation, I don't care what it is, as worthy as they may be, all depends on one thing: rain. And we're getting less and less and less of it as time goes on. You just got to look at the CO2 projections in the atmosphere. It's going to get worse. So we got to start making our own water, and we can't do it relying on homeowners and offices and so forth. We've got to centralize making water, just like we centralized making sewage treatment plants instead of septic tanks. There's a direct comparison there. We can no longer look at individual pieces and say, well, a little bit here, a little bit there. No, we have to get reliable source of 15 to 25 million gallons per day of desal water. So we get that consistency from year to year. We're surrounded by that water, and we can use it right now. Well, not right now, obviously, but putting together a plant to do that. And we got the room for it. We've got a proposition, a 418 that's going to let us do the study. Start the study now. What are you waiting for? Crystal's got an engineering department there. If she doesn't have a person that can be tasked to start that, hire somebody. I just don't understand the delay, given the climate change, and given the fact that 400,000 years before 1950, we had a net increase of 120 parts per million in the atmosphere. And since 1950, we've had another 120 parts per million. That tells you the compression of the problem. We're getting more and more warm.
Thank you, sir, for your time. Two more, Bill Sauter, then Roger Roberts. Mr. Sauter.
Yeah, I think there can be some unintended consequences from fast tracking these big projects to increase water supply. Ever since the giant 77 drought, I've been using 1 to 2 CCF every billing cycle, and that translates to less than 25 gallons a day. For decades, my water bill was averaging a little over $30. 5 years ago, with a new rate structure that acknowledged most of the district's costs were fixed costs, and which I supported, my bill for the same 25 gallons a day went to $50. And last year, again with the same low water use, each bill was close to $100. So every time the district embarks on a major new capital project, water bills, especially for those of us who conserve, take a big percentage jump. Therefore, I think there's a good reason to keep a high bar in place for a desal project. Voter approval fits the definition of a high bar, and I'd like to keep it in place for the next couple of years. At 94% capacity, we have a couple of years until we could be in trouble again. And I'd like to see us use those 2 years to turn our focus to evaluating long-term managed conservation as a fourth water supply option and determine if we can find a path to live within our means without desal. My experience says we can. 10 years ago, using the district's own data, we avoided spending $20 million on a giant storage tank on White Hill. And since that time, we haven't had to build much treated water storage at all anywhere. So history says understanding the trends and potential for water conservation might help us avoid a major desal project. And if it turns out we can't, I think we'd still have the time to get a measure on a later scheduled ballot. So I'll recommend the board vote for alternative 2, defer placing a ballot measure on June's ballot and instead allow the water supply assessment to proceed forward. And where a desalination project to be determined a preferred project, consider a ballot measure at that time. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 13 more speakers. After Phil Sutter, Roger Roberts, Clayton Smith, and GGP. Mr. Roberts, please.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm speaking as an individual as well as a member of the board of Marine Conservation League. And since you are in the midst of Jacobs Engineering doing a detailed cost, benefit, and risk analysis for a whole range of supply options, including desal, it's clearly premature to proceed with a repeal of 418 at this time when you don't even know what the Jacobs report is going to tell you. So I think you should adopt option 2 and not proceed with anything until you've received the report in full and there's been public opportunity to review it and opportunity for the public to comment. And so please just put this back on the shelf for the time being. We think that's the right way to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, Clayton Smith, please.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Ben, I don't know if you were around 10 years ago. Were you? No? Okay, you weren't.
I was definitely around, but not here, no.
Okay, you weren't, yeah, well, I'm probably older than you, but anyways. Actually, I'm sure. I was one of those people who went out and did the initiative petitions to get the ballot measure necessary to stop the desal plant. I hate to have to think here at my late 70s, I've got to go back out on the street and do it all over again. But I can guarantee you that if you want vehemence directed at this board, once again, just do this sudden spring of a June ballot, like that's 2 months away or 3 months away, and spring this on the people of the county. So many thousands of them, and I mean thousands, if not tens of thousands, remember voting against desal in this county. And you're going to find that you're going to have bad will. I would hope that you would begin thinking at this point to develop goodwill for the challenges that lie ahead. And this is a very impolitic way of proceeding forward, this kind of springing this with minimal notice on the county of Marin. And I don't think it really speaks well towards you or the other people that they're your level of sensitivity to our community that are thinking this project through without actually going out to the people, because we like the water we drink. And I will speak at some point in the future more completely about why that's important. But we have a unique kind of water resource here, and the people in this county live here. Many of us, we treasure this. We treasure our water. It's not just plain water to us. It's water from our own mountain, and we love it dearly. Thank you.
Thank you. GGP, please.
Yes, good evening. Carol Page is GGP. You have two issues going here. The first one is the process, and the very concept of repealing 418 is incendiary. Put that with a June ballot, which is a rush to a ballot. So people who know nothing about this, but think certain things sound great, would be casting votes that might be binding when later they learn things that make them say, I wish I hadn't done that. So I would urge you to stay away from June, and also stop talking about repealing 418, because it's going against your goals of trying to come up with options and knowing what you are doing from a broader platform. You can study desal by all means. Technology does advance, but progress does not necessarily overturn the negative things that are happening as well. The desal has a massive energy need, which is now complicated by everyone's acquaintance with PG&E's failures. The rising RENAs, a great concern to many people. And now we have gas and oil supplies that are disrupted by Putin's war. Those are brand new. And alternative energy sounds great, but it is not going to meet the need that this county is looking for. What has not changed is the problem of brine and toxic waste being transported and disposed of, including the safety of the Bay pipeline. And we are certainly reading about problems with pipelines and anchors. Also, not changed is function and maintenance of a system to ensure safe water at a cost consumers can afford. These plants don't just, you can call them emergency, but they just don't go sit in the closet and come out when you need them. This is a tremendous obligation, and people need to understand it. And it needs to be quantified in a way that anybody who does vote on it knows what they are voting for. And you are a long way from getting to that point, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you. The next three speakers are Chance Catrano, Ed, and then Larry Minikes. Mr. Catrano?
Yes, thank you, and hello again. Chance Catrano speaking on behalf of myself this evening. I think folks are commenting on, the viability of desal, and I don't think that's necessarily the question here, but it speaks to the concern of the community and the optics of this process, which is, I think, what is actually before y'all tonight in terms of, how this process takes shape. I think if I were in your shoes, it would make sense for MMWD to bring something like this with a compelling vision or a rationale to point to. The idea, sort of what Ms. McLean had mentioned before, it can feel a little bit like this is crafting permission for something that we don't have the parameters for. I recognize she was using that in the context of a recommendation from someone else, but I think it still applies in this case. Before the planning process, all this really looks like is an attempt to remove the public from the process. And I recognize that to some on staff that might feel like a constraint, and I also think we can hold at the same time that for others that might feel like democracy, or it might feel like something that is important for infrastructure decision of this magnitude that would ultimately change the entire way we think about water conservation and water management in our community. So I think it would be maybe premature, and you might want to wait. And yeah, I think those are my comments. Thank you very much for hearing me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. This will be very brief. In his IJ article today, Dick Spotswood said, quote, "The one approach that should be rejected is relying exclusively on conservation. We are now close to the point where MMWD's 191,000 customers in Central and Southern Marin have done all they reasonably can do to reduce water usage," end quote. Commenting on the percentages that were discussed a little earlier this evening, I'm very confused on the conservation percentages stated tonight. The latest water savings tracker says we're down 7%. Oh, maybe that's against some kind of average, I don't know. From about 11% recently. We were stuck at 23%, I believe, last summer. Where the heck is this 40% conservation number coming from? And I would call that deprivation, not conservation, but where the heck is the 40% coming from? I'm very confused, well, about this in particular. I just reiterate that desal is our only potential salvation, and it takes at least 5 years to build it, probably longer. That's it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ed.
Mr. Minikis?
Yes, good evening, folks. I appreciate what an earlier speaker, Clayton Smith, had to say, that there'd be outrage in the community, and then another speaker talking about the optics of this and the timing. And I think you're hearing all this, and it just, let's assume we were all on the same page and we wanted to go forward with this and put this on the June ballot. Okay, so we're all like, let's do this, rah, rah. It is going to be so difficult to convince the 70% of the voters that voted for this thing to now reverse it and put it back into the hands of the board. And a lot of questions are going to be asked about why and who's really pushing this. And the old thing about development is going to come up again. Are the development interests behind all of this? So it's just a morass. I thought what Cynthia Kohler had to say is really worth investigating for a couple of reasons. You could do it in November because we're not going to have an emergency situation. We're not going to have a big change in our water supply between June and November. So you'd have time to really investigate this. What it would do is it would also be a test case to put it in front of the public and say, look, if we have another emergency, can we go forward with an emergency desal plan? Can we get approval for that? So that you can really get a feel for where the public will be going forward. And in that way, it could be very, very useful. But I think trying to get the public to say we want to give up the right to vote for reasons that aren't really clear is just going to backfire. And with that, thank you so much.
Thank you.
The next three speakers, 8800, Kevin Morrison, and Valerie. Go ahead, 8800.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, Nancy Okada, thank you for letting me speak. I was very, very surprised to hear that you wanted to overturn a decision by the voters. I was just shocked. I couldn't believe you were thinking of doing that. This was settled in 2010, and what Susan and I have said was excellent. And I'm representing the Sierra Club, and we statewide Our policy is that desalination is the last option. Desalination is expensive, it's environmentally destructive, and we are fighting desalination plants all up and down the coast. It's not the answer. Conservation is the answer, and other water reuse, recycling is the answer. So you can finish your water assessment, but the idea of overturning in this body the voters' will of 2010 is just outrageous. So please, do something environmentally constructive. And when you are making water, supposedly making water with all the toxins and other things that happen with desal on the side, it's very, very destructive. And you need to really focus on conservation, and people have shown that they are willing to conserve and that they can conserve. And with all the new gadgets that allow conservation, instead of people just letting their water run down the streets, which is still happening, and there are still leaks, you just need to focus more on that and encourage people, and they will step up to the plate as they have so many times before. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Okada. Mr. Kevin Morrison.
Thank you, MMWD board members and staff. I realize you and your job is to ensure safe and clean water, and I appreciate your work. But I can't see a good path to a desalination plant. Unlike Chair Bragman, I am a desal opponent. The possible benefits are outweighed by the big problems, the inevitable environmental destruction, the incredible cost of building and operating a desal plant. Yet during this meeting, I kept hearing people say all options should be on the table. Well, what about these options? We can use less water. You know that we're still using about half our water for landscaping. We can do more to promote lawn removal programs. We can charge heavy users much more than we do. We can encourage and incentivize the use of commercial and residential gray water systems much more than we are now. We can also improve our stormwater capture. We can help homeowners retrofit their houses with rain grading and permeable surfaces and infiltration trenches, rain tanks. We can invest a lot more money on promoting and subsidizing those programs. And then finally, we need to embrace dual metering. We can implement a dual meter system, keeping the water we use for basic activities inexpensive and charging more for water used on lawns and landscaping. You know that separate pricing will encourage climate-appropriate landscaping and avoid punishing low-income households, because we're not going to be raising rates for people who need the water to live. All of which is to say, those are the options we need to prioritize way before desalination. And I thank you for considering that.
Thank you. Valerie, please.
Thank you. Good to see you all. I have to say I agree with Sue Ives, Nancy Okada, Garrell, Clayton, 100%. I remember the last time we went through this, there was so much more emphasis on talking about our watershed. I don't even think I've heard that word mentioned tonight. It really makes me sad to think about how we've moved from environmentalism to what we call sustainability these days. And the idea of the animals that are part of our ecosystem are just, they're not even present in our discussion so far. They should be. So Larry, having gone through these issues with you, I'm just gonna kind of address this to you because you're the person I know there. So has the technology improved in terms of the contaminants that are in the water from the desal plant, like the pharmaceuticals and now unbelievable amounts of vaccine residue? How much of the desal process is being driven by the push for developers? We need to really know what that is. We need transparency on that. We haven't had that yet. I agree with Clayton. I'll be distributing those petitions right next to him, as you know I will. I spent years and years doing that kind of stuff. I also like the water we drink. Are you still looking at putting the intake in the bay near the sewer system outtake? That's what we were looking at last time. Pretty disgusting idea. Like Frank Egger said last time, the bay is so filthy, maybe we should just hook the intake right up to the outtake, because at least you'd eliminate some toxins that way. What happens to the salinity of the bay and the marine life that depends on it? And there's not been a mention of that. How many more refineries have located along the bay since the last time we looked at this plan? And now they're refining much filthier stuff. They're refining fracking stuff, some of the filthiest stuff in the world. We haven't talked about that. I'm with Gerald. I'm against the repeal for so many reasons, and so many other speakers tonight. I'm with them 100%. And I've talked to my family in Santa Barbara and San Diego. So not only is it very expensive to run those plants, but they're looking at increases of the energy costs and in their rates both. And over the coming years, we know those are going to go crazy. Look what's happening to your food. What do you think is going to happen with desal? We're not going to own our water. Visalia or some other corrupt place like that is going to own our water. We are going to lose our public water. You get involved with desal, you get involved with criminals, and they are flat out criminals. They work with the nuclear industry. We know who they are. We know who the bad actors are. We went through this all last time. We don't need to revisit this again. We have enough criminals working, Marin, as it is with the development. Let's not go here with desal too. Thank you.
Thank you. The next three speakers, James Krajewski, Rick Adler, and former Mayor Frank Egger. Mr. Krajewski, please.
Hi, thank you. It seems to me that the message is just wait. Don't do anything now and we'll see how bad things get. We were in a very terrible situation and we were rescued by some unusual rainfall. So our conservation efforts were not successful. It's certainly, we could probably do better and we probably will do better, but the conservation measures were not working. And we need to have other options available, including desal. I'm not concerned about overturning a decision of the voters because if there's a new vote and the voters decide something else, then it's not overturning anything. It's what the voters want now. What voters wanted in the past can change. At that particular time, we had a different population. We don't have all of the growing population that we have now. We see the effects on our landscape, on our lives and so forth of extreme conservation measures. So why should we not have all options on the table at this particular point? And I think the issue of wait is we're going to get in this situation like we were in last year, in which there basically was, we were dying in a drought. So I would encourage the board to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Adler?
Yes, I thank you very much. I too remember the heated meetings of the 77 about the desal, and that speaks positively for the next item on the agenda, the Zoom meetings, because they lead to much more civilized meetings, even on such a topic. But I think the problem is the type of desal. That's the problem. You keep considering high pressure, high tech, high energy, reverse osmosis desal as the only option. What I've been proposing eliminates all those problems, is low tech, low pressure, desalinization through evaporation by heating the water through solar electricity until all the water is taken out and all you have left is rock salt, which can be sold as a commodity to put on highways for snowstorms. So what you would do is you would take 5 acres of marine watershed hillside that's filled with Scotch broom and put solar energy on it and directly to the desal plant, which heats the water continually until it's all evaporated and distilled into pure water. And you take all the water out, and all you're left with is its salt. So if you considered that type of desal, it would solve all the problems that prompted the ballot measure, because it doesn't have any, that type of desal doesn't have any of those problems. And it's a direct from the solar to evaporation, which is a natural process. We get rain. This just speeds it up. The rain evaporates the water from the ocean, and then the sun evaporates the water from the ocean, comes over Marin and falls as rain. We would just be taking the water out of the bay, heating it, evaporating into evaporation, distilling it into pure water, and nothing goes back into the bay. The salt is sold back east for the snowstorms. I thank you very much. I hope you consider that type of desal. If I was younger, had a little bit of money, I could invent such a thing and become very rich doing it. But I have to leave it up to you guys. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Adler. Former Mayor Frank Egger, then Barbara Salzman, please. Go ahead, Mr. Egger. Mr. Egger?
Oh, hello. Thank you very much. Frank Egger, Fairfax. In 2010, there were two desal measures on the ballot, S and T. T was no desal. Both passed. S was the poison pill that the Water Board put on the ballot to defeat the Citizens Initiative. S received more yes votes than T. So in discussing desal tonight, I guess the question is, where would you put that desal plant? On the Pacific Ocean side, northwest of the Golden Gate Bridge, that's one option. San Francisco Bay at the Romberg Center, that's another option. San Pablo Bay, where it was proposed 12 years ago, or the Petaluma River. Putting a desal plan on the June ballot is really premature. You know, we are told that if the 7 reservoirs are full, there are 79,000 acre-feet of water in them. But we're also told that MMWD also only has 2-year supply. Marin ratepayers need more than a he said, she said statement on annual water sales and usage. Sonoma Water puts 25 years of their annual sales and usage right on their website for everyone to see. Marin Water has no sales or usage on their website at all, no documentation. In the name of transparency, please place the last 20 years of water usage and sales for MMWD on your website to allow ratepayers to see actual numbers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And Barbara Salzman, please.
Hi, I've only been here for the last 20 minutes, so I missed all the other most of the other testimony. But I would say that it's a very bad idea to go to a vote at this point in time, because it seems like what you're hearing is a lot of emotion and not much fact, and at least that's what I've heard. And I agree with the few speakers I've heard that you have not done enough, and I've said this before, on conservation. There's a lot more that you could have done to save water, and there are problems with whatever choice you make. And I think there are lots of problems that people have brought up here about desal. There are lots of problems with getting water from the Central Valley and the water system too. They're just a little more remote. They're not in our backyard, so people don't think of all the fish that are becoming extinct because of that whole sick water system. I think that you, if you're gonna, you should not go to a vote. I think that's a very bad idea, because it's not going to be based on much in the way of scientific information at this point. I think you need to tighten up the conservation efforts and get more information on both alternatives. Thanks.
Thank you. I have Marilyn Price, and then I don't know, I believe John Leszczynski wants to speak again, if you permit that. If not, let me know, but I have Marilyn Price right now. Go ahead, Ms. Price.
Yeah, hi, well, and thank you for taking time. I'll be very brief, but I just heartily endorse everything that everybody has said about conservation. I have been conserving since that drought we had in the 70s. It's not difficult. I think every citizen in this world, particularly the developed world, needs to realize we have to change our lifestyles. We can't live the way we live. And that means a lot more conservation and not, you know, technological fixes are good in some cases, but we've really got to conserve first. We shouldn't be waiting. We need to conserve now, and we've needed to conserve for a long time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Price. And then President Russell, would you like me to have like to hear again from Mr. Leszczynski?
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Leszczynski.
Yeah. First of all, I'm proud to announce that my household of 5 people in Tiburon, for years, we've been using 50% of the district average, and we're kind of proud of that. We did a house rehabilitation, and we put in a lot of you know, low flow toilets and this, that, and the other thing, and we don't water our lawn, and we're 50% of district average. So I'm pretty proud of that, number one. Number two, please remember, you've got to have a realistic estimation of what your future rainfall will be. And you have to factor in global warming. It has to be done. I hear all these things about conservation, except for desal, every other solution assumes rainfall is still coming in some quantity. You just don't know what you've got going forward. You need to look at that more closely, I think, in terms of what the global warming will do. And the other thing is, I keep coming back to sewage treatment plants because I'm very familiar with them. I used to work in that business, same thing with water treatment plants. And this desal system is nothing, in concept, is nothing much different than a sewage treatment plant. As I tried to indicate before, what you're doing is you're centralizing the making of water and dispersing it, and the sewage treatment plant collects all the sewage, cleans it, and moves forward. It's the same concept, really, because there's local options for both things, and we've learned over the decades that we need centralized sewage treatment plants. We can't have every household taking care of their own sewage in septic tanks. We got the same issue now with water. We can't have all these little things, people doing all these little things all the way around. We need more certainty about what we're going to get on a day-to-day basis, regardless of the weather. That's what we need. Desal, yeah, there are desal systems, reverse osmosis and stuff that are far less intensive today than they were. And I make one last statement, please bear with me. I think desal, properly designed, properly installed, properly maintained, is actually the most eco-friendly solution we've got. Why is that? That's because we should be making the water we humans need and leave the rainfall to the flora and fauna in the hills and streams. You know, if you start pulling more water out of the system, that's whatever is falling into the mountains, you are depriving flora and fauna of what they need to thrive. That's hugely destructive. Same thing with putting in additional reservoirs. Those are destructive solutions in an environment. And I don't know why people don't get that, but I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, that's it. That's all I have.
Okay, great. All righty. Well, thank you for your thoughts. We will move on to item 11.
No decision.
Larry, I think
it's information,
for some
right?
Direction.
Well, yeah. How can we give a direction on information item?
Well, it's an information item. That's what we do with information items. I mean, we're not. I mean, unless I'm misunderstanding what staff is asking for.
I don't see how we come to a conclusion in an information item.
We can't take formal action, but we
all
can
the
hear
time.
from board
Right,
members
staff direction.
as to direction if there's an interest.
It would be helpful to have some conclusion discussion, I think would be
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I guess a question is, does staff feel they have direction?
I don't see how they could.
I would say the question of staff, actually. Yeah.
It's at this point for the June ballot, it's somewhat binary. If the board chose to schedule a special board meeting, that would be one track. If you don't, that will be the other. So I think moving on does, if that works for the whole board, it does provide clarity to me that we won't be scheduling a ballot measure for June, and we'll proceed with our studies and see how they go and consider November or some later date were the studies to support that.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's pretty clear that we're not there yet, and neither is the public. You know, the issue really is not crystallized for the public as to what this ballot measure even means and what it means to the district. Most of the comments assume it means that we're moving ahead with desal, which it doesn't. So, you know, I think we've got a long way to go, really, as far as crystallizing the issue for our residents and getting more input from them. And honestly, you know, finishing that water supply resiliency study, I think really is the key to kind of sharpen our focus. So, and like I said, you know, there's more than one bite at the apple. And as Jack said, there might be a million more bites at the apple. So, but I don't think we're really there yet. And I think we should not feel rushed to do so.
I expressed the concern when we started the process here that the ballot measure would simply get in the way of our examination. We'd be spending all our time talking about the ballot and not the projects we're looking at. I am now convinced that's the case. I've become a believer. It will absolutely interfere with whatever examination we're trying to do.
Yeah, I think your case was proven, Jack.
You know, maybe just a final comment on this. It seems to me, I just want to thank, I mean, you know, it's after 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night, and there's a lot of people who've shown up today, and I want to express my appreciation for that, whatever side of the issue you come down on. I think it's been helpful and useful, and I'm very grateful for all the people who have come out to share their views with us. I'll say that, you know, from where I sit, the reasons for putting forward the concept of repealing the ordinance is that it's an impediment to moving forward with desal. But we've also heard very clearly, and I think this has been lost in a lot of the reporting and in, you know, a lot of the, you know, social media and, you know, a lot of the conversations that are happening online. We've also heard very clearly that this ordinance is actually not in any way an impediment to conducting the analyses underway or those that would be required to get the district to the point of financing or constructing a desal facility. The studies are moving forward. There is no legal impediment to doing them. There is, in other words, no waiting. Repealing the voting requirement would do nothing to move these forward with greater speed. At least I haven't heard that from anybody on the staff tonight or anybody else. It could, however, as a number of people have indicated, be divisive within the community, and I don't think we need that right now. You know, those who've pointed out that making this decision, you know, as a number of us said even before we received public comment, making this decision before the facts have been developed in a way that we can share with the public, you know, is problematic. So I think I'm comfortable with the direction that we're going.
Yeah, I'll just echo this, the concerns I had and expressed at the outset. I don't think any of them have been laid to rest, and if only they've gotten larger. So I would agree. I don't think we're at a point right now where it's a necessary step. I think it diverts time and attention from other important matters, and it's not a necessary step for us to take right now. And we'd be better off waiting until the water supply resiliency study is done and gives us valuable information to help us make an informed decision at a later point.
Now we have direction, right?
Okay. Are we ready to move on?
I think so.
Okay. Let's go to item 11, virtual board meetings.
Thank you very much, President Russell and directors. Terry's pulling up a presentation, and I know we're all tired, so I will make this as quick and painless as possible.
I'm glad to have that picture there. I forgot what that room looks like.
Well, that's exactly why we put the picture here.
I've never actually been in that room.
Oh my God.
Right, I walked through it on my way to the office. So this is our boardroom. For those of you who it's getting vague for or haven't participated there. We are going to talk about continuation of virtual meetings under AB 361 and also transitioning to hybrid meetings. As you know, we've been holding, as everybody's pointed out, we've been holding virtual meetings now for some time, first under the governor's order, and then more recently pursuant to AB 361, which was adopted and signed into law last September. Terry, next slide. Thank you. So Assembly Bill 361 allows local agencies to continue to hold virtual meetings during a proclaimed state of emergency when there are other conditions for health purposes that exist. And also requires the board to reconsider the emergency within a 30-day cycle. This board has been taking those actions, has been adopting resolutions on a regular basis, making findings that it was necessary to continue virtual meetings and to allow those virtual meetings to proceed. Next slide. So the things that we've been looking at and all through the pandemic actually, and we continue to look at now is, you know, the guidance from the health professionals. That's what's been our kind of guiding star. So we recently, we'll look at some of the more recent guidance available back in September 22nd to 21, last September. The County of Marin Director, Health of Human Services, issued a recommendation for continued social distancing and use of virtual meetings. This was in response to the adoption of AB 361, making it clear that kind of paving the way for jurisdictions within Marin County to adopt resolutions pursuant to AB 361 to allow virtual meetings to continue. February of this year, the County Health Department confirmed recommendations that were made in September last year remain in place. And the Marin County Board of Supervisors continues to allow virtual meetings while at the same time holding hybrid meetings. And we'll talk more about that as we proceed. February 16th was a bit of an unmasking. I think we're all familiar with for those who are unvaccinated, but there still does continue to be strong encouragement for face coverings, I think, and caution. Now, Terry, thank you. Next slide. So some of the considerations that we look at as we try to evaluate where we are in the circumstances of the pandemic. Obviously, the local case rates and the hospitalizations are a huge factor. So you can see on the graph, it's a little small, but that spike there on the left-hand side is, the Omicron variant sort of peaking in January of this year. So we've come down significantly just in the last couple of months, as you can see. We also need to consider Cal OSHA requirements for our employees. And we look at the risk factors of, the activities that we're doing. Are we indoors? Are we in a close space? Are we wearing masks? Are we not? What's the ventilation like, et cetera. Next slide. So staff's considered this and thinks that it's prudent and that we allow virtual meetings, that the board would allow virtual meetings to continue. That means adopting a resolution that will allow the continued use of Zoom for directors, staff, and public to participate pursuant to AB 361. And that would also continue the 30-day cycle, or within every 30 days, a resolution reconsidering the appropriateness of this. But also, given the circumstances improving, to look at starting some in-person participation as it's safe to do so with protocols in place. So this is the hybrid meeting discussion. Next slide. So hybrid meetings, we've talked about these before. They're a cross between in-person and virtual meetings. And they help to limit the people who are physically present at the meeting in a closed space. And they allow members of the staff, directors, and the public to continue to participate virtually. So some people are there in person, some are participating virtually. There are some examples of this. County of Marin, City of Santa Rosa actually has been doing this for some time, where some of the council members are actually in the chambers on the dais, and some are participating virtually. There's some staff members present, and most of the public, I would say, is participating virtually. Next slide. So in considering commencing hybrid meetings, what this would allow us to do is to have some key staff and directors who may choose to participate in person in our boardrooms, though some may participate virtually. Other staff members and the public would continue to be able to continue to participate virtually. That's via our Zoom platform that we're using. This would limit the number of people in the boardroom, which, as you saw on the slide, has limited capacity. And staff thinks that a good time to start hybrid meeting transition would be the March 24th Finance and Administration Committee meeting. This would allow staff to test out some of the new technology that's been installed there in a setting that wouldn't be a full board meeting. So to work out some of the kinks and the glitches potentially that might occur. And then some key personnel could be in the boardroom, and we'd still have the virtual participation as well. So the current recommendation for this evening is to adopt the prepared resolution that would allow continuation of virtual board and committee meetings pursuant to AB 361, but also for staff to commence limited hybrid meetings for some staff and directors to participate in person as soon as the March 24th FAC. And I'm happy to answer questions to the best of my ability.
What do you envision, Molly, in terms of the hybrid side of it? Where are we going to display the folks that are on the hybrid side? Are we going to try another monitor? Are we going to leave the monitors on the side of the room?
Yeah, so I'm going to probably defer mostly to Terry, but my understanding is that we do have the larger monitor screens that we would then use to display what you're looking at now. So folks who are participating virtually, but also a component of the in-person.
You're talking about the old projector ones?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know about that. The quality is not so good.
Well, you can also look at your iPad as well. I would think that you can bring your iPads up on the dais too.
Right, but the public is what I'm concerned about more than the directors. The second thing I'll throw out, we were in a meeting yesterday where there was a discussion about this 30-day cycle because months aren't all 30 days. And they were talking about the fact that some meetings have had to be rescheduled because they couldn't meet the renewal of the 30 days. I understand it's coming down from the Assembly bill, but it's something to think about. I guess you could short fuse it and do it like every 21 days or something. So you have more than 30, more events.
We've been doing that, President Russell. I've been paying attention to when we're going to run over 30 days from the last board meeting, for example, and then I put it on the next board meeting. Sometimes it's a consent item for consideration of the board so that we don't have a gap.
Okay.
So that's a good point. Excellent point.
Anyone else? Catgut your tongues. Okay.
It's only 9:25.
Yeah, I know. We're only a half hour longer than we should be. The public comment.
Yes, we have 3: GGP, Roger Roberts, and Rick Adler. Go ahead, GGP.
Garrel Page. Yeah, sorry, Larry, to make it go on even longer, but
it's okay.
Your Zoom link is very good, and your unmute feature is also very good, better than a lot of the other meetings I go to. However, your audio is god awful. It's terrible. If you did not have that transcript option, I couldn't follow this meeting. And especially Paul Sellier, I wanted to hear what he had to say. But when he's sharing his screen, you have to go to escape, and then you can't see his charts because you can't fit the transcript on the side of the screen. So there's a few little glitches. And what I am wondering is, I am hearing Terry mention that you have some improvements in your boardroom, which I remember very, very well. And there's not much ventilation in there. If you could plug the audio for this Zoom into your improved features in your boardroom, you might get better audio on your Zoom. Just a thought. I don't know whether it's possible or not, but your meetings have content, they're interesting, and I would really appreciate being able to participate with my ears as well as my eyes. But at the moment, I'm limited to your transcript. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes, you can hear me, I trust.
Yes.
Loud and clear.
So how is the first meeting for the resilience workshop going to be handled? Is that going to be a Zoom meeting, a virtual meeting? Is it going to be some hybrid? What is going to be the process for those meetings?
Yeah, if I may, Mr. Roberts, it's planned to be a Zoom meeting, is my understanding, and Adrian can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but that would be March 9th, I believe. We're not planning on any deviation at this point unless the board tells us that we should be doing so.
Is it March 9th or March 8th? I thought it was the 8th.
It's Wednesday, March 9th from 5 to 7.
Right. Fine, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Adler, and then James Krajewski, please. Mr. Adler?
Yes, thank you. I'm in favor of continuing with the Zoom meetings for several basic reasons. One is the health. We've had several times, I think it was June of 2020, we thought that we were done with the virus, and then the Delta came on, and that lasted about a month, and then the Delta came on, and we had that for another year, and then I think it was the summer of 2021, we thought we were done with the Delta and we were ready to resume normal life, and then the Omicron came, and now we think we've beaten the virus again, or the general public seems to think. Actually, the general public's just tired of the virus. They're done with it. They've had enough of the masks, the uncomfortable masks, and all the debate and the right-wing crazies about it. So, but the virus isn't done with us. There'll be more varieties coming down the road. So I think we should continue with the Zoom meetings for basic health and safety, even though it currently might look like you don't need it. And the other reason is, other basic reasons is the Zoom meetings are just much nicer, much easier. And to attend. I can hear better, I can see better, I can see the presentations. I remember the meetings in the small room, and I remember the large meetings we had at the public schools, everybody sitting on the benches, and you're right, ensued. These Zoom meetings are much more polite and civilized if it comes to the heated debate again. You know, you're tired now through these long meetings, carry on. Think how much more tired you'd be sitting in that conference room. So I think we should continue with the Zoom meetings. And if we need to, for the, I think it's the Brown Act that requires public meetings, put in an advertisement. Anybody that can't attend the Zoom meeting because they don't have the technology or the ability, that to contact you, and you'll set them up with the ability to attend the Zoom meeting. So everybody will be covered, everybody will be able to just participate. And I doubt if you'll get more than 1 or 2 people requiring for an alternative. Probably everybody is capable of meeting these things. Everybody that's interested anyway. So I thank you very much. Keep the Zoom.
Thank you. Mr. Krajewski.
Hi, thank you. I would hope you will continue the Zoom meetings. I think they have been invaluable. I think that they provide easy access, or much easier access for many of us. And I think it provides more input than you would get if you did not have the Zoom meetings. And it provides transparency for the board. Makes it easy to see what's going on for those who are interested. So I would encourage the continuation of the Zoom meetings. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There are no further speakers.
Okay. Can I get a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Director Bragman.
Aye.
Director Gibson.
Aye.
Director Kohler.
Aye.
Vice President Schmidt.
Aye.
And President Russell.
Aye. Okay, item 12, future meetings.
President Russell, if I could, I'm assuming the second piece of the recommendation is supported as well, but I just wanted confirmation that the board supports us for the March finance meeting to test out the hybrid model, where I think the board understands, I do want the public to understand, the Zoom feature will still be fully available in that testing. So I just wanted confirmation from the board. The only difference is some of the staff will be at the boardroom on the podium, and any board member who so chooses could be there as well. But we'll still have the Zoom feature for any board member who chooses not to come in person, and certainly the public and other staff members as well.
I'm not sure of the format, Ben, how we would do that. I mean, the item of approval was the resolution. I don't see anything about the 24th in the
right. It was
report.
Just on Molly's slide as a next step. Part of why we want to do it, if I could, is just to be ready when the state authorization goes away. There's already some discussion and thinking about that. So we do feel it's valuable to do this pilot and see how work through the kinks, as Molly described it.
I think that's all fine.
To chair that committee, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to come in that day. Like, is that essential for the hybrid? Yeah.
No, absolutely
I just
not.
have a very full day, and we've gotten used to the Zooms, and so I'm kind of working my work stuff in so that I don't have to include travel time. Not to mention getting out of my office.
That's why it's a hybrid.
Right.
That's exactly right.
I just thought you might want those of us running the meeting to be there. So.
Not necessarily. The resolution allows, as Ben indicated, for any of the directors to continue to participate virtually.
Okay.
So,
I was just double
that's
checking.
been done in the past.
Might want somebody. Okay, that's totally fine then. It works for me.
And this doesn't sunset, Molly.
No, so the resolution will need to be reconsidered pursuant to AB 361, again, within that time frame. So you'll see it on the March 15th.
Over and over again, okay.
Many times. We did want to, bring a presentation discussion every so often as things kind of shift, and we're considering a bit of a shift here. The resolution will continue so long as there's a basis for it and the board chooses to have that adopted. But this, as Ben said, is an opportunity for us to start doing something a little bit different, have some staff there. If directors do want to participate in person, that's an option, but also the Zoom and the virtual participation will continue to be an option.
Yeah, I was speaking to an attorney client the other day, and I asked him if he thought that Zoom depots were here for good. He said, absolutely. I think it's time we move up to the current world. Why don't we just have this on every consent calendar?
Well, we will definitely have it on March 15th consent calendar, and then again April 5th, because there's going to be a greater than 30 days if we don't do that. So
yeah, and what I was getting at though, why don't we just have a policy that says put it on every consent calendar? It can always be removed, right?
That's true.
So we don't have to think. Just take the thinking out of it, or the chance.
The only time I would say we don't need to have it on a consent calendar is if we're going to have another board meeting within 30 days, and we don't need to actually adopt a resolution.
I understand, but I mean, I like things that are simple. Like if you just do it every time, it doesn't hurt to do it every time. You don't lose anything.
President Kohler, that's my job to make sure that we have the resolution on there when we need it.
Yeah.
But I hear what you're saying.
No, it's me. It's me talking, not Cynthia.
He's President Russell.
Oh, I'm sorry, President Russell. I don't know why. I'm sorry.
No problem.
It must be getting late.
It is. Okay. I actually lost track. Did we get? I asked for the motion. No, I know. Oh no. Oh, that's right. We're already on to the next one. Gotcha.
We are.
Or no, Ben wanted to open this thing up about the 24th. Do we need to do anything, or
no?
You want us to all just shake our heads? Yes and.
Yeah, I think I heard that generally the board's okay with us at the March finance to test the hybrid, with the understanding the board members can come or not. It's all good.
Yeah, and I think the comments about the ventilation in that room should probably be looked at fairly seriously. I don't know. Does that mean we don't go back to having the director and the camera and all that in the back? Those people will be there. Okay.
Yeah, CMC will be there.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So moving along.
And what about the police officer? Are we going to continue that, or have you got that far thinking?
I haven't gotten that far. But we'll definitely, if we need to bring back the police officer, we can.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's one of those things that you got to kind of figure out ahead of time, because by the time you need it, you don't have it, then it's kind of not so useful.
Right.
Okay, future meetings.
Okay, future meetings. Just to remind everyone, it was already said earlier, we'll have our virtual community workshop #1, water supply strategic assessment, next Wednesday, March 9th. It was from 5 to 7 p.m. virtually. Also, our next committee meetings and operations committee meeting, which is on Friday, March 11th. And then our next board meetings, March 15th. We'll have our watershed committee meeting on the 17th, and our finance and administration committee meeting at the end of this month on the 24th. I just want to let the board know for external meetings on March 4th, we'll have the NBWA board meeting at 9:30 a.m. is my understanding. And then also Sonoma Water on March 10th, Sonoma Water Agency will have a virtual drought town hall is my understanding. I saw it, and it's at 6 p.m. And then Friday, March 21st is the Lagunitas Creek TAC meeting, and that's from 9 to 12. Any questions?
Cool. Okay. No, thank you very much. Thank you. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
See y'all.
Thank you all.